Hello, welcome if you are new. My name is Masha, and today I want to teach you how to make this beautiful sort of double wave bracelet. I recently saw this pattern and I thought this is a perfect pattern to make a tutorial on. And you might be able to tell I'm holding this bracelet upside down. This is actually the front side of it, but I do think that it looks better on the other side, specifically because of the wave-like structure of the knots. You can kind of tell from the back here. These knots stick out from the back, and they look like two waves coming and going. And I love this, it looks awesome. Now this bracelet is one of those bracelets that you might have seen from the flip side look like there are just a couple of knots and the others are empty. This is why you can see some of the strings coming out from the sides, and then some strings are empty in the middle. There's some holes in the bracelet as well. That's part of the design. It's because of the fact that there are some knots missing that the other side is able to look like this with a wave structure. But we're gonna get into that when I get into the tutorial. I do want to say that this bracelet is quite simple to make. If you've made a few bracelets before, I think you'll be able to make this. Again, I wouldn't recommend it as a first bracelet. I've got plenty of beginner tutorials, so maybe work yourself up to this point. But at the same time, it is quite simple to make. So let's get to it. So as I mentioned, this bracelet is pretty simple. However, there are some prerequisites that I expect you already know how to do. Specifically what you see right now, I've already made the loop, which is just a basic loop, and I did two triangle ends coming off of that loop. I have tutorials on how to do both of those things, and all you really need to know is the color order, which I'm gonna tell you now. So this bracelet is symmetrical. I've got the same strings on the left as I do on the right. And if you're doing a loop like me, each string is gonna be about 2 meters long, which is then gonna be folded to create 1 meter strings. You can really do this with however many strings you like. I'm doing this with 5 colors. I've got one central color, which for me is the brown. I'm going for a sort of sunflower-ish look. So the brown is the central color, and the central color you need 8 strings per color, or in my case, if I'm folding them, I needed 4 strings per color, since I then fold them and it becomes 8. And for the rest of the strings, you need 4 strings per color, but again, since I folded it, I did 2 strings per color, folded becomes 4. If you have a look at the pattern itself, there's actually a bunch of different variations submitted already to the website, and there's a bunch of really cool color combinations that you can do. So if you're having trouble with inspiration, definitely check out there, and you can also play around with the variation tool yourself. As I said, I'm going for a sort of sunflower vibe, so I've got brown, which is my central color, so I have the most of that. Then I have orange, yellow, and a dark and light blue for the sort of sky, I guess. So both of these triangle ends are exactly the same, and they're symmetrical between each other, but also in itself, they're also symmetrical. So I started off in these triangle ends by bringing out my 2 central strings, which are brown. Then I went and I brought out my orange, my yellow, then the light blue, and then the dark blue. And I did the same thing on the other side, 2 of the central color, 2 of the brown, then orange, yellow, light blue, and dark blue. And same for this one. So you're going to bring out the colors in the order that you need them. The strings for the central color come out first, and then the rest of the strings in the order that you want them in the bracelet. Now what we're going to be doing next is going to be identical for both triangle ends, so I'm just going to start with the one on the left, grabbing the 2 innermost strings. We're going to start off with 2 forward knots, and this is going to be with the brown on 2 other browns. You're then going to grab the other brown on the left side, so coming up from that left part of the triangle end, you're going to do another 2 forward knots on those same exact browns you just did forward knots on with the other brown. There's a lot of brown going on right now. So with these bracelet, these 2 brown strings on this side and these 2 brown strings on that side are the only strings you're actually going to be making knots on. This isn't a normal bracelet. I mean, it is, but I mean, this isn't a usual normal bracelet. It isn't a typical normal bracelet. It's going to be a little bit different. There are some knots missing. So you're only going to be making knots on these 2 brown strings. So the next step is actually super simple. You're just going to take the strings that are left, so the orange, yellow, light blue, and dark blue, and one by one, you're going to do 2 forward knots on these 2 brown strings that just came out from that side. And once you finish that, you do the same thing on the right side. But let's start with the left side. So starting with the orange, just 2 forward knots on the brown. And that's it. You stop right there. Same with the yellow, same with the light blue, and same with the dark blue. So let me finish that real quick. And there you go, so all of these strings made 2 forward knots on the brown, and they are now on the right side of it. You do the exact same thing on this side, except with backward knots. So each of these strings, one by one, do 2 backward knots on these 2 brown strings, right up until the end, starting with the orange. And there we go, we've got that opening done on the left side. We're going to do the exact same thing on the right side now. And again, remember, you start with connecting the browns at the top. So grabbing the two innermost strings, you're going to take the left one, do 2 forward knots on the other brown strings. Then grab the second one from the left and do 2 forward knots again on those same brown strings. And then with the rest of the colors, one by one, starting with the orange, going all the way down to the dark blue, you're going to make 2 forward knots on these brown strings, same as we did on the left side. And then doing the same thing on the other side. So all the remaining strings one by one, starting with the orange, do 2 backward knots on the brown. Alright, so now that opening section is done for both the left and the right triangle, it's time to connect those triangle ends. And we're going to connect them the same way we sort of did the beginning with the brown. Taking the left brown string, we're just going to do 2 forward knots on the 2 right brown strings. Going to connect them very carefully here. And then again, grabbing the next brown string from the left, we do 2 more forward knots on the brown strings coming out from the right. And at this point, I'm going to stop and I'm going to make sure that all of this is lining up correctly and that the loop looks nice and neat and how I want it, and it does. So I'm good. And now we're gonna start going in the opposite direction. I'm gonna start with the inner half. So from the left triangle end, grab this right part, and this time we're working from the blue to the orange, so in the opposite direction. So we were working from orange to blue last time, now we're working from blue to orange. But you're gonna do the exact same thing. For each of these colored strings, you're gonna do 2 forward knots on the brown strings. So starting with the blue, going all the way to the orange, just 2 forward knots on these strings, and you're going to make them quite lightly, because if you start pulling on them too hard, then the strings are going to start collapsing on each other. You're going to make the knots quite loose and quite lightly. I'm actually not going to speed this process up, so you guys get to see exactly what I'm doing. And I'm not tying my knots too tightly in this space, because I don't want that string to pull on itself. I'm just making nice and loose knots in this area. Now going in with the yellow again, I'm not going to make a too tight knot here, just setting that knot in place but not tying too tightly. So that yellow string is now being pulled all the way from the top down to the bottom here, and I make the second knot right here. And then again with the orange, not too tightly, just sort of setting it in place but not pulling it all the way out so it doesn't collapse. And then completing the second knot. That part is done, and all of these strings, one by one, you can see them sort of being pulled in that direction. You can do the same exact thing on this side, but obviously with backward knots. So starting with the dark blue, you do 2 backward knots, again, quite loosely, quite lightly. Then with the light blue, just the 2 knots. See, I'm not pulling too hard, I'm just setting it in place. So it's there, but it's not pulling on anything. So setting that string in place, setting that knot in place, double it up with the second string. And finally the orange does the exact same thing in quite a loose knot as well. And there we go, this side is now completely done. You do the exact same thing on the right side, but of course mirrored. So for the inner side, you're going to start off with backward knots for each of the string, 2 backward knots on the brown. And then you focus on the last part here and you do the exact same thing, but this time you do forward knots. So for each of these strings, starting with the dark blue going to the orange, you do 2 forward knots onto the brown, and that's going to be the last step of the repeating pattern. And that is it. That is literally it. That is all there is to this repeating pattern. What you're gonna go do now is exactly the same thing you did at the beginning with connecting the brown strings on the left and on the right, and then again bringing the strings in with those 2 forward knots or 2 backward knots, and then bringing them back out, connecting them again, and repeating that process until the bracelet reaches the length that you want. Now you might think that this bracelet doesn't actually look anything like what you saw in the thumbnail and what I was showing you before, but that is because this is the wrong side. This bracelet actually looks better on the flip side. And there you can already kind of see the design starting to form, but you really get to see it once the bracelet is complete and once there's more iterations of the design. But just have faith in the process, continue making the design, and you'll get there in no time. So I'm gonna go finish this off camera and I will see you once I'm done. And there we go, this is what the bracelet ends up looking like. And as I showed you in the beginning, there's a wave-like structure to the knots, and I absolutely love how it looks. With picking the colors, I was sort of going for a sunflower vibe. So these are supposed to be sunflowers, and that's supposed to be like the sky. I don't know if that translates very well, but regardless, I think this bracelet looks really cool. And I hope my tutorial was understandable for you. If you still have any questions left after the tutorial, leave them in the comments down below. I'll try to answer as many as I can. I do want to show you though that this bracelet, it's not straight at all. This is what it should have been if it was straight, and it sort of goes to one side. I think that's because I tie my forward knots slightly different to my backward knots, but I think it still looks pretty cute, and that doesn't really bother me that much. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Thank you very much for watching. I want to give a special shout out to my patrons, and especially my top supporters whose names are going to appear on screen right now. Thank you very much for your support. If you also want to become a patron and get exclusive perks for your donations, there is a link in the description where you can sign up. I got a couple new package patrons since the last time that I sent out my packages, so I'm going to be doing another package send out this month. So if you want to sign up for the tier that gets your gift package from me, now is the perfect time to do so. I'm going to be sending them out quite soon. If you want more content from me, I also stream on Twitch. I try to do that 2 or 3 times a week. We've been knotting different bracelets and just chatting, and it's a great time. And if you're not able to make it to Twitch, I also created a new channel called Masha Streams, onto which I've been re-uploading my Twitch streams, so you can watch them right here on YouTube, and that will be linked in the description. But regardless, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!